Hello, this is wmpyr here to talk to you guys about the LLC knife, the Lapu-Lapu Corto. Boom, here we go. And this is a very unique looking knife. As you guys can see right there, it's to me, it's a very amazing knife. It was designed by Professor Bram Frank. So yeah, let me talk about that real quick. So who is Professor Bram Frank? This guy is a Filipino martial arts expert, and more specifically, the style, the lineage that he comes from is Arnis. And his teacher was Professor Remy Presas. Professor Remy Presas was from the Presas family in the Philippines. So they come from a line of Filipino martial arts in that family, and so they have like the family swords and stuff that was passed down from generation to generation, which Professor Bram Frank had become the official protector of the family swords and stuff. So he's pretty much like one of the main heirs to the Presas family style of Arnis. And he's been to the Philippines many times and all that. So, for the average person, that just wants a knife for self-defense, they're not going to care that the knife was designed by someone who comes from such a prestige lineage of Filipino martial arts. But for someone like me, it's exciting because I train in Filipino martial arts, and it just happened so that my teacher's teacher was Professor Remy Presas too. So that's just a coincidence. But, once again, for someone like myself, this is a very exciting knife because, the knowledge, the experience, and the Filipino martial arts philosophy and skill is all put into this knife. But once again, for the common person, they go, okay, who designed the knife? Filipino martial arts expert. Oh, okay, whatever. They don't get it. And it may not mean anything to them, The next thing is maybe they're looking more for something like military, something that comes along the line from a military personnel designed this knife or made this knife. That might appeal more to the average person, But in today's world, the military and police and stuff now is we call it tactical, right? The tactical knives that has become more and more popular recently, and fortunately I feel like it's made a stronger connection with martial arts. So back in the day, I feel like, and back in the day I mean like 10 15 years ago, right? I felt like there was more of a divide between military and martial arts, which is kind of silly because the people teaching military were martial arts people teaching the military hand-to-hand combat stuff, But later on, I feel like today there's a lot more people now that they do both. So they're actually ex-military that are martial arts experts teaching military, But back in the day, that could have been more rare. So you had civilians that were martial arts experts teaching the military. You see what I'm saying? So that there's a divide. And so in the martial arts world, people I think automatically assume that to do a martial arts, it's going to take years and years and years and years. It's all about discipline. And then for the military perspective, it was like, we want something that works fast. So there's a divide there in philosophy maybe, or in approach. But really, that's not the case because, it should work either way, even if you don't put in years and years and years and years, it should work. And if you put in years and years and years and years, you should only get better. So we're really talking about the same thing. There's no divide. You know what I mean? So if you look at it that way, I think now people are understanding that more so. And the exciting thing about this is that recently, and by recently, maybe it was just a few days ago, if I'm not mistaken, there was the Atlanta Blade Show this year. And Professor Bram Frank, from my understanding, every year he goes to the Blade shows, and there's multiple ones held throughout the year, but the Atlanta one's supposed to be, I think, one of the biggest in the U.S., maybe even in the world. And he said the attendance was huge and everything, and there, Doug Marcaida, Sensei Doug Marcaida took a liking to his knife, and they made a YouTube video together. And Doug Marcaida is one of those people that he's also a Filipino martial arts expert, but he's very, very popular amongst the tactical people. I think because of his YouTube channel, I think it's called Funker Tactical. So a lot of the tactical people have watched his stuff and they like it, and maybe it was able to reach a lot of people that were into self-defense, home protection, that kind of stuff. People that are interested in the tactical side, not the martial arts side, but they saw the Filipino martial arts presented it in a way that made sense to them. Because I've seen it happen many times where you could get like the most awesome, Filipino martial arts expert from the Philippines, Grandmaster so-and-so, teaching the police, and the police, I could see it in their face in the video that they're getting immediately discouraged with what they're seeing. They're like, that's too complex. I feel like there's this, there could easily become this gap. They're like, well, you're awesome because you've put in 30 years into developing your skill. I'm a police officer. I'm not going to be doing that. I don't have time for that, and that's not my interest. I'm just doing this because it's a job, and so I could see they're getting very, very discouraged, and then they start going. If they're that discouraged, they're like, does that stuff even work in a real life situation? Is it going to work in my situation against someone that's trying to attack me, take away my gun, or so. The doubt and the disconnect, but Doug Marcaida, from my understanding, is very, very popular. So there was not a disconnect. There was a connection between him and the tactical people. So I think that's going to help people better understand this knife, okay, and be able to enjoy this knife more, which I think is great. I've always thought that this design made total sense to me. And, of course I'm biased because I come from Filipino martial arts. So I know what this knife is. I know what it's talking about, what Professor Bram Frank is talking about. I understand the principles. It makes total sense, I know Professor Bram Frank is friends with Emerson, and Emerson knives is super, super popular. And I'm not here to bash on Emerson because I know they're friends. I don't know Emerson personally, but I have had some of his knives, okay? And they're great knives and everything, so I'm not here to bash the guy, but his knives, I mean, if you've seen Emerson on YouTube and video, the guy looks like a Special Forces commando, okay? So that easily, I think, catered to the tactical crowd, and they, very easy for them to like him and like his stuff. Professor Bram Frank, on the other hand, like I said, comes from a very prestigious martial arts lineage, which maybe a lot of people were like, huh? That's not what they were looking for, So I think what happened was a lot of times people look at this and they go, why isn't it like an Emerson knife? How come it doesn't wave? Why is it? Well, that's because they're completely misunderstanding it. They're wanting it to become like an Emerson knife, and that's not what this is. This is something totally, totally different. And the Emerson knife idea is really about speed. It's about very specific pocket carry and deployment from your pocket for a folding knife, and the Emerson Wave works that way, which I'm sure a lot of you guys know. And that's a very, very specific thing, and that's about speed. From the way that I was taught in martial arts is I don't want to go strength versus strength with an opponent. I don't want to go speed versus speed with an opponent. I want to go strategy and skill versus my opponent. That's the way it was always taught to me. So I'm not against an Emerson knife 100%. I got no problem with it. I have some that have wave functions and whatnot. So I'm not against it whatsoever. But when I look at the philosophy and principles for this knife, it's on another level for me, okay? And once again, I'm not saying this is better than the Emerson knife. I'm saying it's different, okay? So, well, once again, for Filipino martial arts, the idea of just take this thing out, just get it out of your pocket or wherever you're carrying it, just take it out and use it closed, as is. In Filipino martial arts, we have weapons that are similar to a kubotan, a yawara stick, and use it closed. That's exactly this thing right here. Use it closed. And if the situation gets taken care of that way, 100% fantastic. That's awesome. I did not use this as a knife. And that allows me to take this out much, much faster than a knife, because with a knife, you got to wait till a lethal situation, It's lethal force. It's considered lethal force. So, you better have really, really good reason to take it out. With this one, like I said, I'm not using it as a knife. This is a kubotan. I'm using it in that manner. Now, if the situation does not get resolved that way, then it's already in my hand. So at that point, I can use the big ramp here to hook it on things. So the ramp is oversized like this so that it can hook on just pretty much whatever you can hook on. So it's not limited to the pocket. And I really like that. As you saw with my finger, I could do it. Maybe you never know, wherever you're at the moment and you need to access this, you might even use the branch of a tree. You could use your pocket, you could use your belt, who knows, right? And what I also like is the ability to go vicious, really, really brutal, vicious options if you want. So this is devastating stuff, but you could hook off of their neck. That can result in very terrible, very, very terrible stuff. How about the collarbone? That's got to be very, very painful. You could fish hook someone too with this, and imagine opening it that way. Nostril, the ear. I mean, yeah, you could do some really nasty, evil stuff with this. I do like that option. I'll admit it. After all, Filipino martial arts is the art of war. It is originally warfare. That's where it comes from. So anyway, but I do like that you could go non-lethal, and then you could go all the way to lethal and nasty. So that's what amazes me about this thing. And the techniques also that you could use it. You could use the ramp right here for leverage to break fingers, put them in locks and stuff, access pressure points. So now in Filipino martial arts, you guys may have heard the term lock flow. Those are exercises we do to learn joint locks and compliance holds and whatnot. So that could work very well for police officers and stuff. So anyway, another exciting news that I want to share with you guys is Professor Bram sent me on Facebook. He sent me a podcast and I listened to it, and in it, the guys that were doing the podcast, they were really into firearms for self-defense, but one of them, from my understanding, was a student of Paul Vunak. And he was really, really into Professor Bram Frank's knife, and he interviewed Professor Bram Frank, right? And then he was talking to Paul Vunak, and he said, "Hey, what do you think about these LLC knives?" And basically the conversation between him and Paul Vunak was that they really liked it, and they were wanting to use it in training and whatnot. So it was like, wow, that's awesome. So now in Jeet Kune Do circles, I could see this catching on. So more so, once again, that's martial arts, and Paul Vunak out of the JKD people. He's more on the tactical side, because he was famous for teaching military and FBI and people like that. And from my understanding, when Danny Nosanto had people come to him and they're like, yeah, this is all great that you're teaching this stuff, Bruce Lee's art, but I want to do something more for like self-defense or street stuff, then he would direct them towards Paul Vunak. So that's really cool to see, once again, some really famous people endorsing, pretty much, approving, of this knife. That's to me great to hear, because people have asked me, they're like, what do you think about Doug Marcaida? And I'm not here to, what's the point in me mudslinging the guy? The guy has a way more successful YouTube channel than I do, and what he's doing is also Filipino martial arts, and his success, I feel like, is my success, because he's encouraging interest in Filipino martial arts. And heck, it doesn't even have to be Filipino martial arts. He's encouraging interest in martial arts, period. So that's good for me. So that's the way that I see it, and the people that are bashing each other, and to me, that's all just like jealousy and stuff like that, so I don't want to be part of that. I'm not saying, people are perfect and people are great, or I'm not saying anything like that. I'm not saying, hey, we should all be hippies and love each other and life is great. No, that's not what I'm saying. There's some terrible instructors out there. There's plenty of instructors that I don't agree with, but that doesn't mean I have to go freaking, sling them and say bad stuff about them. No, we're all trying, I'm sure everyone, all of us, even the terrible ones, we're all trying to, hopefully help people and get good info out there. So anyway, that's it for now. Thank you for viewing, and take care, folks.